So, did you know that one of the most popular games came from the Soviet Union? When you hear Tetris, you might be thinking of the Game Boy or the NES game, but there's actually 3 different versions on the NES, and quite a few companies that claimed to have the rights to Tetris. The copyright situation with this game was a big mess, and this would lead to a lawsuit. So how did this all happen, and who ended up winning the lawsuit and ultimately securing the rights to Tetris? Well, let's take a look. What's going on, guys? It's Podrez, coming at you with yet another video. Alright, we're not gonna waste time. You've played this. Come on. You might even know that there's a Tengen version out there. Why multiple games? And why do we only hear about this one? Well, I'm gonna attempt to explain that all to you. Alright, so do me a favor. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button right there. It's only a small thing, but it helps our community out greatly. Also, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like. Again, kind of a small thing, but it helps out the YouTube algorithm here. Anyway, let's get started. It was the early 80s, and Alexei Pajitnov worked for the Soviet Academy of Sciences. His job was to see how far he could push new hardware. One piece of hardware he would test out is the Electronica 60, and Pajitnov would develop a few games for it. One of those games in particular was addictive among his friends. This was an early version of Tetris. The game was based off a puzzle game that used pentominoes, which are pieces that contain 5 blocks each. But he thought 5 block pieces would be too complicated, so he dropped it down to 4 block pieces. In his original game, the screen would fill up very quickly. That's when he thought of the idea of making full lines disappear from the playfield. With this new mechanic, this made the game of Tetris potentially endless. His original game was very primitive. The Electronica 60 didn't have a graphical interface, and it was a very basic version. Despite that, Pajitnov created something that's never been done before. No one had ever made a game like this. His new Tetris game became very popular in Moscow, with every institute in the city carrying Pajitnov's game. One medical institute even banned the game because employees were spending too much time playing Tetris rather than working. With the success of his game, Pajitnov was interested in getting it published in other regions. However, the copyright laws in the Soviet Union prevented him from being able to sell his game. So as a loophole, he transferred the rights to the academy that he worked at. This way, he was able to get his game released outside of the Soviet Union. The academy sent the game to the Hungarian publisher Novotrade, and this is when publishers got to see this brand new innovation for the first time. One company that was excited about this game was Spectrum Holobyte. They secured the rights to this game and published a few variants on numerous computers. They overhauled the graphics big time. It actually looks like graphics now, not just ASCII art. They also had an interesting strategy. They really embraced Soviet culture in their games, showing pictures of Soviet monuments and playing Russian music. At the time, the Cold War was going on, and there was still a lot of pressure and animosity between the Soviet Union and the United States, and their respective allies. Embracing Russian culture in these games was definitely an interesting strategy, potentially risky considering the reputation that the Soviet Union had in some countries. So with the popularity of Tetris so far, this would eventually lead to the release of some console versions. This is going to cause some problems. So far, we've been talking about computers, not consoles. That's because Spectrum Holobyte only had the rights to release Tetris on computers, not consoles. Here's a question, so what exactly is a computer? Is this a computer? I would say, yeah, that's a computer. What about this? Would you consider this a computer? No? Why not? It's just a piece of hardware that runs programs. A game is a program, right? So this is a computer then, right? The point I'm trying to make here, it was up for interpretation what a computer actually meant. So when the company Bulletproof Software obtained the Japanese rights to Tetris, they made the first ever console version of it for the Famicom. The company figured they were allowed to do this because the Famicom is, in fact, a computer. A lot of people might not even know this version exists, so let's check it out. So you get some nice options at the beginning, like the ability to change the music and the level you start off on. You can also adjust the handicap, which lets you start off with garbage at the bottom. The controls could use some improvement though. To rotate your pieces, you have to hit down on the D-pad, that's kinda weird. And you hit the A button to drop your pieces down to the playfield. I feel like they got this backwards. You can also only rotate counterclockwise. Not a big deal, but it would be better if you could also rotate clockwise. Maybe the developers thought there was no point of being able to do that. Another complaint, there's no way to gradually descend your piece down. You gotta wait for it to slowly drop down on its own. For example, I want to wedge this piece right over here, so I gotta sit here and wait for it. Oh man. Oh, this is brutal, dude. Oh man. So if you hit the A button, it will automatically drop your piece down to the playfield, but this locks your piece in that horizontal position. This can be frustrating because sometimes I hit the A button on accident, which causes me to drop a piece in a place I didn't want it to be dropped in. So this version of Tetris is interesting because the game is divided into stages. When you obtain a certain amount of lines, the game will tally up your score and then move you on to the next stage. It even resets the playfield for you. This may seem weird compared to later Tetris games, but this was still a very early version of the game and not much of a standard had been set yet. So overall, this game was good for its time, but the controls are very outdated and there will be more games on the same console that outclass this one. So while Spectrum Holobyte had the rights to Tetris in the United States, the company Mirrorsoft had it in Europe. They published a few games on their own, but they would eventually pass over the rights to Atari Games, also known as Tengen. Tengen would release their own version of Tetris in the arcade, and then on the NES shortly after. Tengen's version of Tetris improved on Bulletproof Software's version in a few ways. You can actually rotate in both directions now, and you can gradually descend your pieces unlike before. They also fixed the controls. Hitting down on the D-pad descends your pieces, and using A and B rotates them. This is how it should have been the whole time. Tengen's game is also divided into stages, but this time it doesn't reset your playfield. This version actually comes with multiplayer, which is something we haven't seen yet. It also has a cooperative mode where two people can play on the same playfield. This is a nice innovation. Like with the Famicom version, you have a handicap setting where you can start your game with garbage at the bottom. So overall, Tengen's version of Tetris improved on the concept of Tetris quite a bit. The controls are better than most of the versions before it, and it has new gameplay variations like two-player mode, which is very innovative. Some people consider this the best Tetris game on the NES. So while Tengen appeared to have every right to make Tetris on the NES, a certain company would step in, leading to a lawsuit. So it was 1989, Nintendo was preparing for the launch of the Game Boy. They really liked Tetris and thought this type of game would be a nice pack-in title for the Game Boy. Imagine being able to play a game like this on a handheld console, that would have been awesome. So at this point, there were some misconceptions. As we know, Spectrum Holobyte and Mirrorsoft secured the rights to release Tetris on computer systems, not consoles. But the term computer was up for interpretation, so a few console versions of Tetris managed to slip through the cracks. So with this in mind, Nintendo's solution was simple: obtain the console rights to Tetris the correct way. After a visit to Moscow, Nintendo managed to successfully do this. Now that they have the console rights to Tetris, their next step was to go after Tengen for their, apparently, illegal version of Tetris. Nintendo sent a cease and desist, but Tengen believed they had the console rights to Tetris. As far as they were convinced, they secured the rights from Microsoft, so they didn't back down. From there, the legal battle began. In the courtroom, Tengen tried to argue that the Famicom and NES were computers, and therefore the rights to Tetris would transfer to those as well. But this argument was not accepted, and the judge ruled in Nintendo's favor. With Tengen losing the case, they had to withdraw their NES versions of Tetris from store shelves. Now that Nintendo had the console rights, they created a couple of their own versions of Tetris. Let's take a look at the NES version, which is the one most of us are probably familiar with. This version really streamlined Tetris in many ways. Rather than the game being divided into stages, you just advance to the next level without any interruption. This is how I prefer it to be. The controls are similar to Tengen's game, which is a good thing. You press down to descend your piece, and you can rotate in both directions. Very simple. The big upgrade here is in the presentation. The music is absolutely fantastic. And the graphics are really nice and colorful. I really like that the blocks change color every level. However, Nintendo's Tetris doesn't have as many features as Tengen's version, which is why some people don't like this one as much. While there is a handicap mode, there's no two-player functionality, nor is there a cooperative mode. Despite that though, I really like Nintendo's version the best. The presentation is much better here with superior music and graphics. I like the extra features that Tengen added to their version, but I prefer playing vanilla Tetris, and Nintendo's game really delivers on that. A lot of people think of the Game Boy version because that one is extremely important to the success of that console, but the NES version is one of the best iterations of Tetris. That's why the NES game is the version of choice that's used in the competitive scene. So keep in mind, what I mentioned in this video is only scratching the surface. There are quite a few other companies who were involved in this, and there's much more to the story than what we talked about. If I discussed everything, it would be a gaming historian episode. I just wanted to simplify this a bit because it's a confusing story about one of the most popular games in history. With the success of Tetris in Moscow, Alexei Pajitnov sought to get his new game released outside of the Soviet Union. This led to Spectrum Holobyte and Microsoft publishing versions of this game in other regions. But this also led to misconceptions. A couple console versions of Tetris were created despite the respective companies not having the rights to release Tetris on consoles. The original Famicom version had some neat ideas, but the controls were outdated and future games would outclass this one. Tengen's version had some really nice innovations, including a two-player option, but unfortunately they lost the legal battle and they had to take them off store shelves. And finally, we have the NES version. While it's scaled down in some aspect, the controls are nice and the graphics and music are fantastic. This is the quintessential Tetris game, all of which stemmed from an ambitious programmer who just wanted to see more people enjoy his game.
Hey, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like rating. It only takes a second and it gets my video noticed by more people. Also, if you enjoy my content, drop a subscription, that way you'll be notified when my next video comes out. Plus, it's completely free. Finally, drop a comment if you have any questions, suggestions, or just want to share your gaming experiences. This greatly helps the YouTube algorithm, and I'm usually pretty good at replying back. Anyway, have a good one, guys.